Get ready for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in. It is another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, where we talk District 4 activities week in, week out in the great state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. We're joined today by Stretch Armstrong, a.k.a. Scott Burton. What up, Stretch?
Hey, what's going on, Brandon? Yeah, Stretch just kind of falls into the category of what Scott's thoughts are this week about spreading yourself too thin. So stretch.
Gotcha.
See what I did there?
Yeah, for those that are unfamiliar, Stretch Armstrong was a toy when Scott grew up as a kid, and it was still around when I grew up as a kid too. But basically, it was this kind of wrestler-looking guy, and he had these really long arms you could stretch out, and there was this goo inside. I only know what was inside because my brother and I broke ours when we were kids.
Well, that was the whole goal of those toys, is just find out what's going on inside, because nowadays you break it open to see what's inside. It's batteries.
Right.
Back then it was goo and something they grabbed off of INL dump site. It didn't matter. But that's the cool thing about growing up with toys in the 80s is they weren't plugged in. They weren't electric, and you could stretch them, you could pull them apart. And I remember, having a blast with Slinky and Play-Doh and all that kind of stuff. And Lincoln Logs. Anybody do Lincoln Logs and Tinker Toys anymore? No. And our listeners probably don't even know what they are unless they grew up with us or me in the 80s. So those are the good old days, Brandon.
I know. So one quick story about Stretch Armstrong, and then we'll get into the actual Prepcast proper. So my brother and I had a Stretch. We're like 17 months apart, so we're pretty close in age. We had a Stretch Armstrong when we were kids. We stretched it too far. It broke. The goo went everywhere. We kind of quickly scooped it into the corner, and then all kids do, we just put a piece of furniture to hide it. and then we kind of forgot about it because we didn't want to get in trouble. And fast forward 6 years later, and we're actually moving out of that house into a new one. And so we're packing all the stuff up, and my dad all of a sudden was like, "What is this in the corner?" It's all dried on the carpet. And
good heavens, did anybody ever just vacuum at your house? Move things and vacuum?
So not in that corner, apparently.
Apparently not. Well, all right. You know where to hide the body next time.
That's right. So yeah, the remains of Stretch Armstrong are probably still in that house. I don't know how you get that out of the carpet once it's dried, but anyways, it's gonna be an interesting time into the postseason where you mentioned it. How do you stretch yourself out? Because athletic directors are having to grapple with state cross country this weekend in Pocatello at the Portneuf Wellness Complex, state volleyball tournaments going on up north in North Idaho, and the district swimming is happening, and the state football playoffs begin this week as well. And we're going to get to all of that momentarily, but first we're going to take a quick peek back at the week that was, and specifically state soccer tournaments. Scott, these took place over in the Treasure Valley last week. We had some good performances both on the boys and girls sides, but we've got to talk about Wood River coming through with the boys 4A championship. They defeat Sandpoint in the title match 3-1. Congratulations, Wood River.
Yeah, boy, what a great accomplishment for Wood River. I mean, they came in as the number 1 seed in the tournament. In fact, the Great Basin had the top 2 seeds, Canyon Ridge number 2. And, for Wood River and their program, when you look at the bracket, and anytime, no matter what the sport is, you're going to have some things fall your way. I don't care if you're a number 1 seed, a 4 seed, or whatever. And in that opening round, number 2 Canyon Ridge lost to Blackfoot. And then number 3 Caldwell lost to Sandpoint. And then all of a sudden, Wood River's like, holy crap, if we can get by Bishop Kelly, we should be able to do this, right? And so they opened with a win against Idaho Falls, 3-1. They got really 2 quick goals to start it off on Thursday to kind of set the tone, and they got out of that one 3-1. And then they move into that thriller with Bishop Kelly in the semifinal, scoreless, and then on to penalty kicks we go. And Wood River able to pull that one out 5-4. Ben Torres had a huge save and goal for Wood River. on that penalty kick shootout. And Brandon Marquin, he scored. And boy, what a thrilling game it was for Wood River. And if you're a fan and you're watching brackets and you're doing your own little bracketology, you couldn't help but think we just watched the championship match. And that's nothing against Sandpoint. But in the championship game, it was all Wood River, 3-1 over Sandpoint.
Yeah, and it happens so often in soccer, especially since we started seeding the teams, where those lower seeded teams pull the upset, because in soccer, all it takes is you could play great for 79 of the 80 minutes of the match, but in that 1 minute, a slip up, one mistake, you could be down 1-0. And so that was great for Wood River to survive and advance. And I love how in the penalty kick shootout, we always focus on the guys who scored. Very rarely do we mention the guys stopping the shots. So I'm glad you gave a shout out to Ben Torres, the goalkeeper, too, because sometimes they get overshadowed a little bit, I think, when we're discussing penalty kick shootouts.
Yeah. And you look at it, it was 5-4, and you don't see that a whole lot. And which means one stop was the difference. And Torres is the one that made the stop. And you don't get anywhere in soccer without a decent goalie. I don't know how many times I've heard coaches say, man, if we just had a goalkeeper, it would be a lot easier, because they can attack, but they can't defend, And so great job by Torres to get that one stop they needed.
Yep. And of course, the fans love the penalty kick shootouts. The coaches despise them, because it really is a true wild card at that point. Just ask Canyon Ridge. They lost to Blackfoot in the opening round on penalty kicks 4-2. So it's the way she goes sometimes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And for this Wood River team, it was, quite an experience too. I mean, they kind of made it an entire, I don't want to say vacation, because it wasn't a vacation, but they made it their own, right? And so they hung out at the Student Union building at Boise State, having pizza Thursday night, and then they went and watched Boise State women's soccer team beat Nevada. They got up in the mornings, and they all went on nature walks. They all kind of did all this together, and then culminating with team meetings, in the evenings. And so they just really kind of made it an event for them. And quite an experience. And they were just, tickled. And this team represents their community well. And when I was talking to Coach Gregory about it, he just alluded to the same thing that we talked about, I think last week or the week before, whatever, in one of the segments that we had about how a team represents their community, and the way they behave, the way they act. And that was one of the things he mentioned about this group. He goes, this team represents our community very well. From freshmen to seniors, different backgrounds and experience. And they just represented Wood River well. So congratulations again to Wood River boys soccer state champs.
Yeah, way to go. Real quick, I did want to mention the 3A boys soccer tournament as well. Shout out to the Cutthroats from Sun Valley Community School. Got to the championship where they lost to a very good Sugar Salem team 2-1. I mean, you're talking about probably a handful of plays, and Sun Valley is winning another soccer championship, but second place is a great showing. And the flip side of that, we talked about Wendell going into the state soccer tournament as well, Scott. They lost in penalty kicks in their opener to McCall Donnelly 3-2, but true to that Wendell mantra, they didn't pack it in. They continued to fight, and they came all the way back to win the consolation final and get that black trophy for winning the consolation side of the bracket. So congrats to both Sun Valley and Wendell coming home with trophies as well.
Yeah, there were some really good soccer teams in this bracket. I mean, it went chalk as far as the championship goes. And, let's start with Sun Valley. I mean, a couple of shutout wins to start the tournament, one over Coeur d'Alene Charter and the other one over American Falls. So they head into the championship match with Sugar not having allowed a goal yet in the tournament. And then Sugar was really lucky to make it out of that semifinal round, as it took overtime to get by McCall Donnelly, who just about became the darling of the tournament, knocking off Wendell and then nearly knocking off number 1 seed Sugar. And then McCall Donnelly had that little hangover in the third place game, falling to American Falls in penalty kicks. But Sun Valley losing 2-1 in that championship match to Sugar, and then Wendell rebounding and then cruising through that losers bracket. They knocked off after losing to McCall Donnelly, knocking off Fruitland 4-1, and then beating Coeur d'Alene Charter 4-0. So hardware for Wendell, hardware for Sun Valley. It was a really good showing for those teams.
Yeah, way to go, Magic Valley soccer clubs, competing well throughout the season and also at the state tournament. And congrats on a job well done. And now those athletes get ready to move on to maybe a winter sport. Scott, could be basketball, could be wrestling. Some will move to indoor soccer, and that's fine too. So,
well, we talked about that with Wendell. Wendell said that's what they do. That's what those kids do in Wendell. It's soccer year round. I mean, so those kids in Wendell are going to be moving right into that indoor soccer.
Yep. We'll be keeping an eye on that as well. All right, Scott, state volleyball is this weekend. We recorded a state volleyball preview special, kind of independent of all the Prepcasts this week. Myself and Lindsay Togiai Afuk. We broke down all the brackets. We gave our championship predictions. We picked our dark horse teams. We gave a player to watch from every single team. So you can get all your state volleyball content there. We broke them up into classification previews on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel. I also put the big preview into this podcast feed. So if you subscribe to the Magic Valley Prepcast on your favorite podcast app, you can listen to our state volleyball preview as well. Big stories from the Magic Valley, just quickly, going into state volleyball, are Kimberly defending 3A champs. Can they run it back? Canyon Ridge and Twin Falls at the 4A tournament. Both have had trials and tribulations this year. We'll see what they can do. Declo comes in as the number 8 seed in the 2A tournament because they come from a small conference. What can they do? And then in the 1As, you're looking at Murtaugh potentially competing for a top 3 finish. And Oakley is there competing as well. And then at the 1A D2 level, Dietrich survives a slugfest with Richfield to get out of districts. And now what can the Blue Devils do on the state stage? But we'll see what happens with our Magic Valley teams, and good luck to all of them at state this week.
Yeah, there's a lot of representation from the Magic Valley in these things. And, there's some really good teams around the state. I mean, we talk in the 4As with Twin and Canyon Ridge, and we know that they're both really good. I mean, Canyon Ridge is kind of had their struggles, but they got it together and enough to get there. Twin peaked at the right time. And in 4A, it's all about Skyview. It always has been, hasn't it? But Skyview comes in the number 3 ranked team in the state behind number 1 Bonneville and number 2 Lakeland. So who knows what's going to happen in the 4A. And then, you look at the 3A too, defending champ and undefeated Kimberly, number 3 seed. So yeah, go figure. There's some really good volleyball teams that are going to be playing this weekend.
I think for a whole lot of different reasons, we're going to have to do another Max Preps based episode very soon, Scott.
Yeah. We get into some football brackets, may hint at that just a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, and the process and the machinations, and there is a lot to unpack there.
There is.
We will do so on a future episode for sure. But good luck to all our state volleyball teams. You can check all that state volleyball preview content at the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or in this podcast feed. All right, Scott, it is time to take a look now at the state football brackets. We have arrived to the postseason. Opening round of the playoffs starts. We're recording this on Thursday, October 26th. This starts tonight with a Magic Valley matchup, a couple of them actually, a couple of Thursday night games, and we'll get to those in a moment. I figured we would just go classification by classification, and what I'll do is I'll share my screen so you can see the brackets. So as you're watching this video on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page, you'll be able to see the brackets up on the screen and follow along. If you're listening at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcasts, it's all good. We've got the brackets right at the top of the homepage, and you can follow along that way as well. So let's start with Class 4A, Scott, this big 16-team gargantuan bracket. And let's start with the district champs from Twin Falls. They get, on the strength of that win over Minico last week and in commanding fashion, they jump from about the 6 or 7 seed to the number 4 seed, and they will host number 13 seed Lakeland Friday night at 7:00 at Twin Falls High School. Every week, Scott, we do the IdahoSports.com Pick 6, where all the Prepcasters pick 6 games across the state, one from each classification, and we predict who we think will win.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only person who picked Twin Falls to beat Minico last week. And I'll tell you what, when the game was over, the players had the receipts. They had that queued up and ready to go. Brandon's the GOAT. He's the only one that believed in us. I am a welcome man in Twin Falls.
Yeah, you are. And I saw that, and it's amazing how many people are following our picks right now. And look, it doesn't surprise me that Twin won the game. All right, so let's just start there. But the way that they dominated that game, especially coming out of the locker room in the second half, because you go into halftime and you're thinking, hey, this is going to be a good ball game. And then Twin just boom, boom, touchdown. I think he had a pick six and a return for a touchdown or something like that. And next thing you know, it's blown wide open. And Twin, man, they really flexed some muscle. So congratulations to them. I'm not surprised. And I'll take them this week. How's that?
Yes, I think the Bruins are playing their best football at the right time, and they get a pretty good first-round matchup here. Lakeland comes in as the 13 seed. Lakeland has been banged up all year, Scott. They have been without their starting quarterback since basically the first game of the year. At one point, they had to play 3 or 4 games with their third-string quarterback. Like, even the second-string guy was hurt. Now, the second-string guy is back, and that has steadied the ship a little bit, but also complicating things for Lakeland is their best offensive player, running back Lovey Wheel, has been out for, half of the season as well. And he is slowly working his way back. He's been on somewhat of a pitch count, but I think he might be ready to go for the playoffs full bore. But this is a Lakeland team that doesn't have great depth. They have a lot of two-way starters, so they tend to wear down as the game progresses. And this, to me, just all plays into Twin Falls' hands. I think we both like the Bruins here, yes?
Oh, yeah, I think so. And, one of the biggest things about heading into state tournament time is you got to be healthy. And if you're not healthy, then, you just have a really hard time surviving. And, Twin right now is relatively healthy. They've got a ton of really good players, a lot of good playmakers coming in with an 8-1 record. Their only loss is to Pocatello, who's also in this tournament. And like you said, Twin Falls probably playing their best football of the year right now, especially coming off of that big convincing Great Basin championship win over Minico. Lakeland, and the thing about Lakeland is you just always don't know what you're going to get because of the schedule that they play. But even bigger than that is, like you said, it's the injuries. This one is all Twin Falls.
Yep, completely agree. As for Minico, the team that finished second in the Great Basin Conference, they got one of the auto bids. There were 2 available from the Great Basin, and the 8 auto bids automatically get the top 8 seeds. Now, Minico would have been a top 8 seed regardless. They check in as the number 7 seed, Scott. They will host number 10 seed Emmett Friday night, 7:00 at Minico High. This is a game we will be broadcasting on IdahoSports.com. Scott, you will be on the call for this one. I'll be honest, I'm a little worried for Minico here. I think Emmett is a potentially dangerous team lurking.
Emmett is very dangerous, and it's because of the style of football they play. And oddly enough, it does have some resemblance to Minico, because Emmett is going to be one of those teams that is physical. You look at, they're coming in with a 6-3 record. Their losses are, to Skyview, to Twin Falls, and to Bishop Kelly. And, well, guess what? Guess who's in the tournament? And this particular Emmett team, if you let them push you around, they will own you, because they rely on the physical style of football. And that's what they want to do. And they want to beat Minico down into a position to where they just can't stand up and take another punch. Minico's got that tempo offense. They want to get up and they want to get going. Emmett, on the other hand, they're going to be throwing multiple looks at you defensively. I mean, watching film on these guys, they're odd fronts, even fronts. They're going to drop back into some cover 3, cover 2, man up. They're going to do a lot of different things, because what they want the opposing quarterback to do is to come up to the line and see something different every time. And then in the trenches, they want to beat you up, because this is a team that is committed to the weight room. And so that's why Emmett poses such an interesting threat, I guess, to Minico, because of their physicality And because defensively, they really try to mix things up. So this will be interesting. I'm excited to call this one. It's a number 7 versus number 10, both coming in with 6-3 records tomorrow night at Minico.
Should be a great one. And Emmett really is like a tale of two stories here, where there was the stretch of the season where they played with no quarterback, basically, where they took Isaac Brennan, a wide receiver, and played him at quarterback early on. And they had some narrow wins over Fruitland, which is not a good team. And they did beat 5A Lake City with Brennan at quarterback. And then they got their QB back, Ryder Scheib. And since then, Brennan's moved back to receiver. Quentin Smith has been more involved in the running game. And you saw it. They only lost to Bishop Kelly by a touchdown. And Bishop Kelly is the, number 1 in the polls, number 2 seed overall. Does that say more about BK or Emmett? I guess we'll find out soon. But I don't know. I just have a bad feeling here about Minico, and I'll go on the record. And again, Minico Nation, I'd love to come back and be wrong next week. But I have a sneaking suspicion Emmett can come over and get the job done. So.
You know what? And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, those first 4 games they played without, up to 7 starters, Emmett did. And so that first half of the season, it wasn't the same team. It's not the same team. And now they're healthy. And their quarterback came back and played his first game of the year against Twin, and so he had to still get his feet wet and get his rhythm going. But this is a healthy Emmett team that's dangerous. And I don't know. We're going to see. And Minico's got to get over this losing in the first round bit, because they didn't last year, or but over the last couple of years, first round at Minico hasn't been kind to them. So I don't know. This is going to be a great game. I'm excited for it.
Very interesting for sure. 2 other teams got in from the Great Basin Conference, Burley and Canyon Ridge. Burley took 3rd, Canyon Ridge took 4th. They played each other last Friday, and Burley won in a somewhat close matchup. Burley comes in as the number 15 seed. They'll travel to number 2 Bishop Kelly. They already hosted BK earlier this year. It was pretty one-sided. And as for Canyon Ridge, they're the 16 seed. They've got to go to undefeated Hillcrest, the number 1 seed. If that wasn't bad enough, Scott, their stud quarterback Connor Willis broke his collarbone. He's done. And so I just, Burley and Canyon Ridge, it's great that they got to the playoffs. I just don't envision a path where they can get a win here.
No, start with Canyon Ridge. 16 versus 1. That's really all you need to know. And Hillcrest is number 1 for a reason. They're 9-0. They're playing in a really tough part of the state. And Canyon Ridge having that big injury. Hey, congratulations on getting there. But I think it stops there for Burley. Burley, and who knows? Bishop Kelly is Bishop Kelly. They are solid, and they should win the game. They beat Burley earlier, 59-7. But, at least Burley's got a game under their belt with them, and maybe they can make a few adjustments and battle and keep it close. Well, we'll see. But it's just a tough task for Canyon Ridge and Burley to go up against number 1 and number 2 on the road.
Yeah, but good luck to both of them, both the Bobcats and the Riverhawks. They will play Friday night, respectively, at each of these venues. So Canyon Ridge will be at Hillcrest. That game is actually going to be played at Thunder Stadium, which Bonneville and Hillcrest used to share. And then you also have Burley at Bishop Kelly, 7:00 Friday night at BK's Field also. So that's the 4A bracket. Let's move to 3A, Scott, where your district champion Kimberly gets slotted as the number 3 seed overall. The 5 district champs automatically get the top 3 seeds, or top 5 seeds for this first round. And then what happens is after the first round, everything gets reseeded, and Kimberly will actually move down a couple of slots behind Teton and Weiser, a couple of second place finishers from other districts. But for now, Kimberly is the 3 seed, and they'll host an old familiar face, district rival Gooding. They got the last playoff spot the Senators did. They're the number 14 seed overall. This game will be Thursday night, tonight, 7:00. Scott, you'll be on the call for this one on IdahoSports.com.
Yeah, for 2 weeks in a row, it's going to be Kimberly taking on Gooding. And last week, it was all Kimberly, 45-0. Hopefully Gooding can keep it close, make it a game. But Kimberly is certainly in the driver's seat here. And that one day when we get to max preps, I've got a lot to say about this bracket. and I'll just leave it at that. So, so Kimberly Gooding tonight, kick it off. And then, you've got some other Magic Valley teams in there. I mean, Wood River for the second year in a row, but, they're going to have to travel to Snake River as the 13 seed travels to the number 4. And you also have Buell in there coming in at the number 9 seed, and they're going to McCall Donnelly. Whoa, what a trip that's going to be. And and that could be a real close game. That game has got my attention because I like Buell in this one.
Interesting. Okay, now this was one of the games we had this week on the Idaho Sports Pick 6. I went the opposite way. I picked McCall Donnelly here in the 9 versus 8. I'm really high on this Vandals team. Their only 2 losses this year were to Weiser and Homedale, the 2 teams in their district. And both games were close for most of the game before Homedale and Weiser pulled away late. They also have a win over Timberlake, the top team from the north this year. And I think in general, they've competed pretty well. I think Buell is a year away. I think Buell's got a lot of young sophomores and juniors, and I think this will be a good experience for them. And I think next year we'll see them really rocking and rolling. But again, I would love to be wrong, Indians Nation. And
I would too, because I think you caught me in the picks. You were one back, and now we're tied.
That's right.
Yeah, we got to have something go my way here this week. I don't do second place very well.
Right. And then as for Wood River, the number 13 seed, they've got to travel to number 4 Snake River. Now, Snake River is only the 4 seed because they won District 5, Scott. Snake River in reality in Max Preps is like 8
on the refreshed one.
Yes. So
yes,
I think, believe it or not, I think Wood River got the best draw in terms of a first round opponent. I think this is a winnable game for Wood River. Certainly. I mean, Snake River was losing at halftime to American Falls 2 weeks ago, a 2-7 American Falls team, and they rallied late to win. And I think with Wood River, we talked about this kid a couple weeks ago, but Conrad Foster coming over from the soccer team, he's got a leg, and that can be a factor in the playoffs. I think having a kicker as a weapon like that.
Oh, absolutely. It changes the whole dynamic of how you approach things offensively, knowing that you don't have to go for it on 4th and 20. From the 30-yard line, it changes everything. But you're right. Wood River got a really good draw here, and I don't know. It's definitely gettable for the Wolverines.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. That'll be so Wood River at Snake River Friday night 7:00. Buell at McCall Donnelly Friday night 6:00. On IdahoSports.com. We will have video coverage of that game so Buell fans can tune in and watch the Indians. And then, of course, Thursday night, Scott, Gooding at Kimberly, also on IdahoSports.com. They can tune in and listen to you on the call there. All right, 2A bracket, Scott. Declo wins the conference championship over Wendell in a pretty decisive fashion, this 2-team conference. They are going to be the number 1 seed throughout the playoffs because of that win over Westside that we talked about a couple weeks ago. So they're going to rest up and get ready for the quarterfinal round. Meanwhile, Wendell did get in. They got the basically the number 4 at large seed. Now they're going to have to travel to Bear Lake, the defending state champions, Friday night for a 7:00 showdown. I think, I've seen Bear Lake play with my own eyes. I called one of the Bear Lake games earlier this year. I've seen plenty of Wendell on film. Just the eye test tells me Wendell is a better team than Bear Lake.
I agree with you. I think Wendell is primed to win this game. I think, Bear Lake records are pretty similar, 4-4 for Bear Lake, 5-4 for Wendell. But, Wendell is playing well. I like their schedule, and I agree with you. I like Wendell in this, even though they're the number 4 traveling to the number 3. And this particular bracket is, I don't know. I like the way they do it. It's interesting, because you've got 12 teams in it, but 5 of them get a bye. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 champs get a bye. And then you've got these at-large berths, and then they reseed the whole thing again. So I really like this bracket. I like Wendell. And as far as the other Magic Valley teams, this is Declo's to lose. I just like Declo.
Yep. I like this bracket. It's a good balance of rewarding your district champs, right?
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
get a first round bye, and then making the teams that took second. Okay, there's still a path for you to play your way into the field of 8, but you're going to have to go get a win against a tough opponent. So I do think this is one of the more balanced brackets that we'll see here. This 2A.
Well,
so good luck.
well, it is. And the thing I noticed about this bracket when I was just kind of looking at all the teams that had qualified in all the other brackets, all the other brackets have got a couple, 2, 3 teams, 4, sometimes maybe even more in the bracket with losing records, right? This particular bracket has just one team in it with a losing record, and that's the number 5 at large Firth. They're coming in at 3-4. Even the number 6 at large Marsing comes in 5-3. But there are some really good football teams with some really respectable records in this 2A bracket.
Yeah, I think that's another topic we could, pontificate on down the road is, how many teams is too many teams. I think 4A and 3A are maybe a little oversaturated right now in terms of the playoff field. And I think 2A has hit that sweet spot for sure. All right, let's go to the 8-man brackets. Now, we broke these down last night, Scott, on the Idaho 8-man Prepcast, myself and Will Henneke and the coach Lane Kirkland. So if you want to really get the deep dive on the 8-man game, of course, you should listen to that every week. But in this bracket for the 1A D1 ranks, Oakley was the district champion. They got the number 1 overall seed and the first round bye. Murtaugh ends up taking second. They beat Lighthouse Christian in a game that wasn't particularly close. And then Cary actually took third place. They were part of a 3-way tie with Lighthouse and Valley, but Cary, actually finishes third, which was important because there were only 3 auto bids available from the league this year. Now, everybody else still got in via the at-large, but for Cary, it was nice to know they had that security blanket. And despite Cary technically finishing in third, they're still seated below Valley and Lighthouse Christian, which I thought was pretty interesting. But let's talk about the game that's happening Thursday night, 7:00 in Murtaugh on IdahoSports.com. It is Lighthouse Christian at Murtaugh. Second year in a row this has happened, Scott, where the Lions and Devils have played each other in the regular season finale, and then they got to turn around less than a week later and play each other in the opening round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and that is a really interesting thing when you have to turn around and play somebody 2 weeks in a row. And, last week it was all Murtaugh. I mean, they doubled up plus 63-30 over Lighthouse. I mean, this Murtaugh team is pretty stinking good. But when you're Lighthouse, having to play them 2 times in a row after getting beat, I mean, really, you've got nothing to lose. Murtaugh's the one that needs to kind of be on alert here. Just because you just thumped them, now you're going to play him again. What is your mindset, right? Are you going to be looking past this game because you beat him by 33? Or are you going to dial it in because it's the playoffs? And I think that's the interesting thing about playing a team back-to-back, one to end the regular season and then to start the tournament.
So last year, Scott, Murtaugh won the regular season finale, got to host Lighthouse. Lighthouse came down to Murtaugh and stole the win in the first round. So Murtaugh is hoping to avoid a similar fate.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yep.
Yep. I did want to give a shout out to Junior Benitez from Murtaugh. He only got to play, 3 games last year before a season-ending injury. He's been healthy the entire year. It's been so fun to watch him run the ball every week. Last week, Scott, 302 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns for Murtaugh.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah, this kid is fun to watch. And, and like you said, last year was so kind of disappointing just because he couldn't play. And you knew this kid was special. And now he's getting to put it on full display. And he's one of the main reasons that Murtaugh is so tough this year.
Definitely. So Murtaugh likes to run the ball, obviously, with Junior Benitez and company. Lighthouse Christian spreads it out. They throw it around with their great senior quarterback, Justice Schrader. If we had the budget of like an ESPN or a Fox Sports, we'd have all these graphics. It's Justice Schrader and the Lions taking on Junior Benitez and the Red Devils. You know what the funny thing is, Scott? Neither one of those guys played in last year's playoff matchup. Junior was out with the season-ending injury. Justice Schrader got hurt in the regular season finale against Murtaugh last year. And famously, Case Van Leeuwen moved from wide receiver to quarterback and helped pilot the Lions to the upset win. So it's going to be interesting to see both of these guys healthy and playing in the playoffs for the first time against one another also.
Oh, yeah, no question. And the cool thing about this game is they're just 2 contrasting styles. I mean, it's Air Schrader, taking on the ground and pound, and it's a lot of it's going to be controlling the clock, and I love the contrasting styles because there's a certain chess match between coaches in there about how you try to control the clock. What do you do defensively to slow a team down like Lighthouse through the air? And then for Lighthouse, I mean, having a guy run the football like that all the time it beats you down and it wears you out if you're just constantly giving up 7 yards in a cloud of dust and making tackles and your defense is out on the field that long, because a lot of these guys are two-way starters, and the defensive side of things is where you really get tired.
Yeah, tough to get thumped on play after play like that for sure. Let's talk about Valley. They are the number 4 at-large team that qualified. They are going to host Potlatch in a pretty interesting first round game. These teams are very similar. Dynamic dual threat quarterbacks, Josh Hardy for Valley, Jack Clark for Potlatch. Both teams can light up the scoreboard. Both teams also have a propensity for allowing points to the opposing team sometimes as well. I do like Valley here at home. I think they're kind of a sneaky team that it wouldn't surprise me if Valley's playing in the Final Four at some point.
I like Valley here as well. I mean, this is a team that it really centers around Josh Hardy. I mean, if he can get it going, then he's a hard guy to stop. And Valley is no stranger to 8-man success, because it was just a few years ago they won the whole thing, and they have just been able to really score a lot of points this year. They ran into a couple of stumbling blocks in their, so what are they, 5-4 right now? I mean, they lost to Butte County, solid team, lost to Murtaugh in a defensive battle, 62-58. And then we talked about their loss to Cary, 8-6. I mean, that one was just an anomaly. And Cary figured out that if you're gonna have a chance against Valley, you've got to figure out a way to stop Hardy. And Cary did that. Now, the interesting thing about that game is how much of a blueprint did that provide for the other teams, maybe Potlatch, to go back and look at that film and say, what did Cary do? Because obviously they stumbled onto something. And so we'll see what Potlatch does to contain Hardy.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting battle for sure. I think the most intriguing of the first round matchups by far. And then you talked about Cary. They get the number 7 seed here for the opening round. They've got to travel to number 2 Grace. This is a team they've gotten familiar with the last couple of years. Scott, they've played Grace each of the last 2 opening weeks of the season. Last year, they lost to Grace 7-0. This year, they lost 36-0. Talking to Coach Kirkland from Cary last night on the Prepcast, he said, before we beat them, we got to just score a touchdown first. I mean, that's the first step. We haven't scored any points against them. And then from there, maybe we can build on some momentum. Cary, I think, has the best defense of any of these teams that are playing in the opening weekend, except for Cami. And Cary, as long as that defense travels, they're going to have a chance. The problem is can the offense put enough together to get them a win? Yeah,
this Cary team had to find their stride. I mean, we've got a new coach, new system, new everything. And, we're moving on from the Kirkland name, which is just still hard to swallow if you're a Cary fan. But it took Cary a bit to kind of figure out who they were. I mean, they started the season with 4 straight losses, and one of those was the shutout loss to Grace. Then they played Butte County and only scored 8 points. Lighthouse they lost to, and then they lost to Oakley and only scored 6. So they're still trying to figure out what's going on. And then it was that win against Valley, 8-6, that kind of springboarded this Cary team into thinking, you know what? We can hang with some really good teams, and maybe defense is the way to do it. Don't know. They lost to Glens Ferry, but they're starting to score points now. The offense is coming around. They put up 32 on Glens Ferry, and then, they got thumped by Murtaugh, but they put up some points, and then they beat up on Raft River, put 44 on the board. So this Cary team is interesting because it really did take them a while to figure out who they were. And they still may be figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, it is head scratching. I mean, they beat Murtaugh, pretty convincingly 32-12. And everyone was like, huh? But then they lose to Glens Ferry, the last place team by 2, 34-32. Coach Kirkland said the key has been the defense has been forcing turnovers all year long, no matter who the opponent was. He said now finally Carey is starting to cash in on those turnovers and actually turning those into points, which happened last week against Raft River. The game was 0-0 until about 5 minutes to play before halftime. Carey scores. They force a 3 and out. They score again. And then Raft River fumbles at their own 30-yard line with like 30 seconds to go. Carey scores a third time to take a 0-0 game. And in the blink of an eye, it was 20-0 at halftime. And if Carey can do that, I think they could be tough on the road. I think I put them in the category of Buell, where I think they're a year away still. They're a very young team. This will be a good experience. Grace got all the way to the 1A D1 championship last year, but good luck to the Panthers. I would love to be wrong.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would too. And I think I misspoke on the Murtaugh game. But yeah, they did win that 32-12 and then followed that with a 44-point victory over Raft River. But you know what? The thing about this is, yeah, they did lose to Grace in the opener 36-0. If nothing else, and they are a year away, then you look and see what are you going to do against Grace this time around. Can you close the gap? Even if you lose, you make it a game. It springboards you into the next season. It's like, hey, look at the improvement that we made and the direction that we're going. So I think this game with Grace is a lot more than just a playoff game.
Definitely. So we'll see. Good luck to the Panthers on the road Friday night, 6:00 in Grace on IdahoSports.com. And again, if you want to see the full schedule of games, we're covering 17 playoffs. You can click on the game streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com. All right, Scott, finally 1A D2. It went just as we predicted. Camas County 1, Hagerman 2, Dietrich 3. Camas County gets a first round bye. They will get the winner of the game I'm broadcasting Friday night, Scott, Garden Valley and Clark Fork. So I'll be able to give you a detailed scouting report on the Mushers' opposition heading into the quarterfinal round. But more specifically for Hagerman, second place finisher, they get to host Mackey in the opening round of the playoffs. Scott, did you hear how Mackey qualified? It was pretty interesting.
Why don't you fill me in there, Brandon?
Okay, so it came down to a 3-way tie for second place over in East Idaho in that conference between Water Springs, North Gem, and Mackey, and they had all beaten each other. Mackey beat Water Springs beat North Gem beat Mackey. Well, the criteria they used to break the tie is point differential amongst the three teams when they played each other. Wow. So North Gem beat Mackey by 6. Water Springs beat North Gem by 6. So Mackey comes in knowing they played Water Springs last Friday. They said, we got to get the win, but it has to be by 7 or more points, and we win this thing outright. If we win by only 6, like everybody else, it goes to a coin flip, and nobody wants that. So what do, Scott? They win by 8. They got the bare minimum they needed to be on the right side of the tiebreaker, and they're in.
You know, and that's just advantage Mackey knowing that going in, because Water Springs and North Gem, they had no clue. And then Mackey gets that advantage of knowing what they have to do. Well, you know, go get it done. And they did. But that is a scenario that you don't see very often. In conference, you know, the thing is, maybe people don't realize that a lot of times it's the conference rules that make the tiebreakers. It's not state, it's conference. So whatever your conference has designated as your tiebreaker is really what it is. And so that's the point differential between those three. But yeah, well, all right, Mackey's in and they get to go to Hagerman. You know, this particular bracket, I mean, there's a couple of really good teams. I mean, you start with Kendrick, you know, the machine that is known as Kendrick, 7-0. But last week they really got people's attention positively, negatively, whatever, by beating up on Deary 112-6. Yeah. So people are talking about that one.
I think, and I mean, just observing from a distance, a lot of that was scored in the first half, and then they pulled the starters and kind of powered down from there. But it's hard for Kendrick as well, because
yes, it is.
They don't get, I mean, this happens every game where the starters just aren't playing a full games worth of reps. And Camus is kind of running into the same problem this year. But more than that, Kendrick has a hard time getting teams to schedule them, where several teams have backed out of commitments to play Kendrick as well. So they really do have to take advantage of the opportunities that they have before them. They only played 7 games. A lot of these teams in the bracket played 8 or even 9 games. So
yeah, you know what? And that is such a good point, Brandon, because last week when we talked about in the Scott's Thoughts things about, running up the score, there is always a game within the game. And the final score doesn't always dictate, because the point you brought up is that Kendrick is a team that is so much better than everybody else. And they've got to get themselves ready somehow for state playoffs. And it's tough to get a team ready for state playoffs if your starters don't ever get to play. And because of that, unfortunately, there's going to be some of those games where it's like, man, we got to leave our kids in because they have got to get some reps. And you don't want them just to run dive the whole time. Just, they're not going to get any better. So that game within the game really is something that you have to consider. And so, like I said last week, the final score doesn't always tell the story. I don't know if it tells the story on 112-6, but
right.
It's hard not to see that just jump off the page and go, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah, it was interesting for sure. And I think people would tell you Kendrick and Camas County are kind of on this collision course. They're on opposite sides of the bracket. I do like Hagerman over Mackey. I think Hagerman's a pretty good team. And honestly, I think Hagerman could go up to Mullins St. Regis and win that game as well. I mean, Mullins St. Regis as a district champ, maybe not as strong as a second place team from that really good District 4. So Hagerman, Final Four, wouldn't surprise me at all. And then on the bottom half of the bracket, right below Hagerman, we have Dietrich traveling to Council Thursday night, 6:00 on IdahoSports.com. Dietrich, to me, a lot of years coming in as the 3 seed, I would go, that's not your typical 3 seed out of the district, and I'd give them a chance. But having to play Council, one of the 3 best teams right out of the gates, is going to be tough for Coach Brody Estelle and company.
Oh, no question about it. They've got a tough draw, and even if they get by that, what's their reward? Oh, it's Kendrick. So anybody like in that little area of the bracket is like, really? Come on. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's going to be a real tough task to face Council. It's not the best draw for Dietrich.
Yep. We'll see, though. Good luck to the Blue Devils. They play Thursday night in Council, 6:00 on IdahoSports.com. Good luck to Hagerman as well. All right, Scott, those are the football brackets, and that means we're to the portion of the show where it's time for Scott's Thoughts. And interesting topic this week. I wanted to talk about overcommitting yourself, because it happens to you, it happens to me, it happens to all of us. And then we find ourselves spinning too many plates, and inevitably one of them is going to crash to the floor and break into a billion pieces. So how do you prevent yourself from overcommitting yourself? Scott, take it away.
Well, this one is tough because I feel like a giant hypocrite even talking about this, because it is something that I'm guilty of as well as anyone else. So here's what I came up with about taking on too much and spreading yourself too thin. A 5-year-old boy is playing in his room. His toy box overflowing with fire trucks, G.I. Joes, helicopters, and all the toys a young boy could ask for. After a while, this boy walks up to his dad and says, "Daddy, I want a new toy." The father takes a knee and looks his son in the eyes and says, "Getting a new toy is fine, but you'll have to give up one you already have. We just don't have the room." And thus, this 5-year-old boy learned his first lesson in overfilling your plate, or your toy box in this case. Yet today, we don't get that lesson. It seems we constantly overextend ourselves, fill our plates to the brim, and accomplish nothing more than paying rent on Anxiety Avenue. So why do we do it? What makes us pile on to the point of tipping over? It seems like a pretty cut and dried topic with a simple solution, but for some reason, we have the biggest problem putting our foot down and saying no. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You feel like you've bitten off more than you can chew. The tiniest changes in your schedule upend your day. You constantly eat on the go. You don't sleep enough. You dream of running away. You do nothing well, always on the edge, anxiety ridden. You're not having fun, and your body is shutting down. Well, for me, that's a Tuesday. However, for some, that sounded like a big farm commercial where a new pill might be the answer. And sadly, this becomes another talking point in demands of a rigorous lifestyle. But if you notice, the physical detriment to this behavior is tremendous, and it's something that has taken a toll on our collective physical and mental health. Yet we continue to do this to ourselves. Why? Well, I think the need to take on too much is steeped in the idea that more is better, that quantity upstages quality, and that this hustle culture that we live in, where success comes from total exertion every single day, is the accepted norm. The result of all of this is manic compression, where you squeeze more and more into your life that eventually it comes apart at the seams. We stop being human beings and we turn into human doers. You know, there are a couple of other reasons this happens beyond societal norms. Did you know that always wanting to be busy is in the top 4 trauma responses? And that FOMO, the fear of missing out, is a driving force as to why we jump at every opportunity presented to us. We live in a world that almost admires the busyness. We brag about how busy we are, how many activities we're in, how many friends we have, and yet our involvement in these endeavors is nothing more than superficial because we don't have the time to invest in them. We truly miss out on life when we take on too much. Let me ask you, how many people truly know you? How many people can truly get to know you when you spread yourself so thin that you're almost invisible? Look, I get that we're busy people and that sometimes the mountain of items to check off on your way to the top gets ridiculous. And sometimes, hey, that's life. But the issue becomes our inability to shut it down. And sometimes we get overwhelmed, not because we take on too much, but because we take on too little of what strengthens us. So how do we stop making our schedule become our identity? Well, it starts with setting some boundaries and knowing who you are and what fits into your value system. For if you don't have a set of core values that govern your life, well, the world's going to ask you who you are. And if you don't know, the world's going to tell you. So cling to these principles and let them guide you in the decision to take on the next project or the responsibility that somebody wants to give you. And set yourself some boundaries and stick to them. For example, pick a time at night where you shut it all down. No phones, no computers, no exceptions. And if people don't like it, remember that the only people upset about you setting boundaries are the ones benefiting from you having none. Walls keep people out. Boundaries just show them where the door is. Now, I understand that the world is exciting and possibilities are endless, but operating without a master plan will just get you double and triple booked. So learn the strategies of time management. For if you don't know how to control time, it will control you. Take a moment every day at the beginning just to sit down and plan things out as best you can and utilize the planning fallacy. That's the idea where if you have a meeting scheduled for 30 minutes, well, schedule it for 45. If you think running errands is going to take you an hour, schedule it for an hour and a half. The idea is to build that time back into your day because time is the most valuable commodity we have. So use it wisely. And the most important thing to remember is take care of yourself. If you're not scheduling me time, keeping the reserve tanks full, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not taking the time to enjoy the silence, then you probably should stop being a yes man. Remember, you're not required to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. And if you're in a leadership position, like coaching, learn to delegate. Put a coach in charge of grades, another one in charge of social media, and another one for busing, and the list goes on. To wrap this up, we need to prioritize. We need to get organized. We need to realize that it's okay to say no. Spreading yourself too thin is common, but we sacrifice so many things, including our family. And when it comes to family, it's your presence, not your productivity, that's required. Take on what you can, but take on what you can and can do efficiently. Make sure what you commit to aligns with what you are committed to. Piling too much on your plate only makes you rushed and half dedicated, and things never get done correctly. And lastly, if you don't even have the time to do it right, when are you going to find the time to do it over? And those are Scott's thoughts.
Once again, knocked it out of the park, Scott. As you were talking, the old cliche came to me. You know, the greatest gift is your time, or the greatest present is your presence. And it can be. I do this all the time. I'll be with family, and a work email comes up on the phone, and okay, give me 2 seconds, and next thing you know, 15 minutes have gone by, and you're working, and you don't even realize it subconsciously. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's such a hard habit to break, and we're all guilty of it, and so, this little thing was as much for me as it was for anybody else. It's just that, man, we got to be conscious of it, and that's where it starts, is just being conscious of some of these behaviors, and realizing that, hey, you know what, no is a complete sentence, and
yes,
it's okay to say it.
That's right. That was a great one, Scott. As for next week, Scott's thoughts, it's going to be somewhat similar to a topic we've already visited earlier this year, but I thought it was a good time to bring it up and try to explore it from a different avenue. So last week, Scott, the Grace volleyball team, they're playing in a 3-team district with Chalice and Butte County, and there's only one bid to state available. And Grace and Butte County are both top 3 teams. Only one gets to go to state. Grace has already lost to Butte County previously in the volleyball tournament. So if they get back through, they've got to beat the Pirates not once, but twice. So Grace, last Thursday night, beats Chalice first in a loser-out match, 3-0. Then they play Butte County and win 3-2, setting up the second and ultimate showdown where they win for a second time, 3-2. They played 13 sets across 3 matches in the span of about 5 or 6 hours, Scott. It started at about 6 o'clock at night. The last point wasn't scored until after midnight. It was a marathon. Grace gets to the bench during timeouts, and backup players are taking ice towels and draping them around the players to try and cool them off. And so my question is, we talked about earlier this year about how do you perform under pressure when the spotlight and the focus is new to you? Well, it's not new to Grace. Grace is a team that's been to state numerous times, and they're used to this. My question is how do you continue to dig deep? You can dig deep for a quarter of a football game or a 5-minute burst in basketball, but when you have to play multiple matches, multiple sets in a row, boom, 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 how do you keep going to that well? How do you keep digging deep and finding the energy to accomplish what seems impossible?
Wow, that is an interesting take, because the contrast to that is anybody can dive deep for about 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Right.
But to keep the longevity, it goes so much deeper than that, because, there's 2 things that just popped into my head. Number one is you've got to train your body for that longevity. But the other thing too is you have got to take care of yourself. Because your body is going to fight you every second of the way in those marathon matches, those marathon sets, marathon games. And if you are not taking care of yourself through, diet, hydration, whatever those things are, then there's no way your body's going to be able to dig deep like that. So I'm really going to have to explore this one, because that is a different take on how to dig deep and toughen up in a long period of time. Okay. Challenge me on this one, Brandon.
Yeah, it's easy to go to the well once, but how do you, when you got to keep going back, how do you find the strength to do it? Because Grace did. I mean, it was incredible to see. And again, Grace and Butte County should both be at state, but that's another topic for another day, Scott. So
Oh, yes, it is. And we see that all the time. So there's a lot of things that we still have to talk about.
yes. Well, for now, our focus is on state championships. Of course, next week we'll be here to recap state volleyball, state cross country, and the quarterfinal round of the football postseason. So, thanks again for tuning in, everybody, to the Magic Valley Prepcast. For Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Baney, and we will see you next time on IdahoSports.com.